I'm the short, fat, insecure, middle-aged thing.
I made you short?
Hi, I'm Brian Rowe. This is the Awards Contender, and in today's video, I'm counting down my list of the top 10 most egregious acting Oscar snubs of the 1990s. Here we go. Number 10, Drew Barrymore, Scream.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
What did you say?
Okay, so this was never going to get an Oscar nomination. I get that. It's a slasher film. Horror films were not popular in the mid-1990s. Like, this one was never going to happen. But I feel like in the decades since, we've gotten a lot of great horror films since 1996, but very few performances, especially like limited performances, that have been as strong as Barrymore is in that opening 13-minute sequence. I mean, it is such a classic horror film opening now. One of the very best we've ever gotten. And sometimes I think about, like, if Drew Barrymore had not been as monumentally great in that opening sequence of Scream, like, would the movie have been as popular? Like, would it have done as well? I do think Drew Barrymore is key to that film's success. It opens on an amazing high. Drew Barrymore is bringing it in that sequence. I love her in this movie. I feel like if Janet Leigh could get an Oscar nomination for Psycho, it is not outside the realm of possibility that Drew Barrymore deserved an Oscar nomination for that sequence in Scream. I thought she was deserving of it when I was 12 years old seeing that movie for the first time, but even today, at age 38, with all the Oscar nominations we've had before and since, I don't think that would have been a crazy, silly, ridiculous Oscar nomination at all. Like, Drew Barrymore has never received an Oscar nomination in her long career. I think she deserved one for Scream. I think she was that good. Wes Craven only directed one actor to an Oscar nomination, Meryl Streep, for Music of the Heart. I think he should have had two. I think Drew Barrymore should have also been nominated for Scream in Best Supporting Actress. Now, who do we remove from that lineup to include Barrymore? I would take out Joan Allen in The Crucible. I mean, outside of Lauren Bacall, it's kind of a stuffy category, Best Supporting Actress of 1996. There was room for kind of a wild card there. Barrymore getting in for Scream would have been an all-timer. I also would have loved Kevin Williamson's screenplay getting into the original screenplay category.
Don't do this, I can't, I won't.
Your call.
Number 9, Samuel L. Jackson, Jackie Brown.
You ain't gonna be in here no more than 10 minutes.
Man, I ain't riding in no goddamn trunk for no minute, man. Why I can't ride up front with you?
You can't ride up front with me. The surprise element is 90% of it.
There are two things that really baffle me about the Academy Awards. One, that Samuel L. Jackson only has the one nomination for Pulp Fiction. Like, he's never gotten a nomination since for Jackie Brown, for Unbreakable, for Django Unchained. He's done some really great work in the last, almost 3 decades. It's weird to me that he only has that supporting actor nomination for Pulp Fiction way back in 1995. He should have at least 2 Oscar nominations, I would say. And for me, if there was one other movie he had a nomination for, it would also be one made by Quentin Tarantino, and it would be Jackie Brown from 1997. Now, the other thing that confuses me about the Academy Awards is, how did Jackie Brown only get the one Oscar nomination? Robert Forster for Best Supporting Actor. That's a great Oscar nod. I love that. It was such a surprise on Oscar nominations morning, but like, how does the screenplay not get in? Okay, fine. Best Picture, Best Director. The enthusiasm for Jackie Brown at the end of 97, early 98, it wasn't as great as it is today. Like, I think today we really appreciate that movie. It really grows on you. The more I watch Jackie Brown, the more I love it. It's one of those films that gets better every time you watch it. But it was doing okay in the precursor ceremonies, like both Pam Grier and Samuel L. Jackson got in at the Golden Globes, and then Pam Grier got in at SAG. I mean, there are a lot of great performances of 1997 that could have made it into the Best Actor category at the Oscars. I do think there's room. I don't think this is a year where, well, there were just too many people, it was already a stacked category, and there's no room for change. I do think there are at least 2 performances that got in that could be taken out, and I just think Samuel L. Jackson is on another level in Jackie Brown. He is so great, funny and kind of charming, but also dangerous and unpredictable. Like, it's a really terrific performance. Quentin Tarantino does bring the best out of Samuel L. Jackson. I do think he deserved an Oscar nomination for Jackie Brown. As much as I like this performance, I would take out Dustin Hoffman for Wag the Dog and replace him with Samuel L. Jackson for Jackie Brown.
When you absolutely, positively got to kill every mother in the room, except no substitutes.
Number 8, Michelle Pfeiffer, Batman Returns.
Meow.
So I talked about this in my Michelle Pfeiffer and the Elusive Oscar video. I think she deserved an Oscar nomination for Batman Returns, playing Selina Kyle / Catwoman. It is just one of her most original, daring, most exciting performances ever put on film. And this was the era where she was getting nominated for lots of things. She had just received 2 Oscar nominations back to back for Dangerous Liaisons and The Fabulous Baker Boys. And I just think her turn in this movie is so riveting. She's funny, she's a great comedian, and she's dark and dangerous and creepy at times whenever she's in the suit. It is a dazzling comic book performance, and I feel like if Heath Ledger can win the Oscar a decade and a half later for The Dark Knight, like, where was Pfeiffer's nomination in the early 90s? So I think a few things happened here. One, comic book movies were just not really beloved by the Academy in the 90s the way they have been, more so in the last 15 years. Like in the early 90s, Batman Returns, it was only going to show up in a couple technical categories. That was never going to get into an acting category at that time by the Academy. The sequel was also considered a lesser movie than the 1989 Batman. I feel like if Jack Nicholson couldn't break in for his performance as the Joker, then Michelle Pfeiffer had pretty much no shot for this. And the other thing was, Michelle Pfeiffer did get an Oscar nomination for a 1992 movie. It just wasn't Batman Returns. It was Love Field, which came out at the very end of the year in December. That nomination always strikes me as kind of odd because Love Field was not well liked. It was a bomb at the box office. And it's like, that's the movie we give her the nomination for, not Batman Returns? I mean, I don't know. It's just too bad. I feel like her third Oscar nomination should be for Batman Returns, not Love Field. But hey, at least we get to appreciate that amazing performance she gives in that film whenever we want. So who do I replace her with here? I do think Michelle Pfeiffer for Batman Returns would have gotten into the supporting actress category, not lead actress. And so looking at these nominees, I feel like the one I would take out is Vanessa Redgrave for Howard's End and put in Michelle Pfeiffer for Batman Returns.
Why are you dressed up like Batman?
Because he is Batman, you moron.
Number 7, Robin Williams, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Look at this. My first day as a woman, I'm getting hot flashes.
What can I say? It is really, really, really difficult for a comedic performance to get in at the Oscars, especially in the lead acting categories. Like supporting actor, supporting actress, it happens here and there. I think Ryan Gosling has a very good chance of getting in at next year's Oscar ceremony for Barbie. But when it comes to the leading acting categories, you almost never see it. Usually in lead actor or lead actress, the competition is so intense. There's 10, 15, 20 performances. I just think it's really tough for a comedy movie performance to get in. But having said that, Robin Williams in Mrs. Doubtfire should have made the final cut. Like, the movie was super popular, one of the top grossing films of 1993. He was nominated at the Golden Globes. He won Best Actor in a Musical or a Comedy, and he had 3 Oscar nominations behind him for Good Morning Vietnam, Dead Poet Society, and The Fisher King. So it was like every other year for a while there, Robin Williams was getting an Oscar nomination. He would eventually win, of course, for a dramatic performance in Good Will Hunting. So that's 4 Oscar nominations. I do think the late, great Robin Williams should have at least 5 nominations, and one of them should have been for Mrs. Doubtfire. I think it is a supreme example of a performance that should get in at the Oscars because it has both comedy and drama. He creates not just one fully realized human being, he creates 2 to dazzling effect. The comic sequences are inspired. What he's able to do under that makeup, I think, is really impressive. And his dramatic moments throughout the movie are excellent too. And with the movie just being as popular as it was, it surprises me to this day that he didn't make it in. It's just because the movie is a quote-unquote comedy, so he maybe was 6th or 7th or 8th place or something. It's like, oh, God forbid we put a comedic performance in lead actor at the Oscars. Oh my God, what's gonna happen? It would have been okay. It would have been fine. It would have been deserved. Robin Williams deserved that Oscar nomination. Now, who to take out here is tricky because I think all 5 performances are great, but if I had to remove one, although Anthony Hopkins is great in The Remains of the Day, I would take him out and put in here Robin Williams for Mrs. Doubtfire.
She's got the crabs, dear, and I don't mean Dungeness. I'm being blunt as a spoon, aren't I? Forgive me. Oh.
Number 6. Reese Witherspoon, Election.
I don't know what you're referring to, but maybe if certain older, wiser people hadn't acted like such little babies and gotten so mushy, then everything would be okay.
I am very happy that Reese Witherspoon is an Oscar-winning actress. I adore her performance in Walk the Line, but my favorite, by far, Reese Witherspoon performance in the movies is her turn as Tracy Flick in 1999's Election, directed by Alexander Payne, his second feature film. This movie slaps to this day. It is so smart. It's so biting and funny and real, and it's got such a great ensemble of actors. I love Matthew Broderick's performance in the movie. Jessica Campbell as Tammy Metzler is an all-timer. And then you have Reese Witherspoon. I don't think she's ever been as good as she is in Election. She completely disappears into that character who just has to win her high school election no matter what. There's no vanity. She gives it 110%, and you almost don't even recognize her at times. She physically changes, like how she walks, how she stands. It's just a brilliant comic performance. And she got in at the Golden Globes. I think that was her only big precursor nomination. I mean, the big problem with Election was it opened early in the year. I think it came out in like April of '99, and it didn't make a lot of money. Critics loved it. It got into the Oscars in the adapted screenplay category. I remember being so excited about that on Oscar nominations morning because I did not think Election would get in. It was one of my 3 favorite films of '99. And so when that happened, I was like, yes! But I was still like, that Best Actress category of '99 is not one of my favorites, although of course I love Hilary Swank in Boys Don't Cry and Annette Bening in American Beauty. I just talked about that race in my Annette Bening and the Elusive Oscar video. I think Meryl Streep's Oscar nomination for Music of the Heart is one of her weaker ones. I'm not a huge fan of The End of the Affair. And then I liked Tumbleweeds fine. I think Janet McTeer was good in that movie, but I'm not wild about those other 3 nominations, so I think there was room here. And again, I'm happy she went on to win an Oscar for Walk the Line. I love her Oscar-nominated performance in Wild, but I do think Reese Witherspoon should have 3 Oscar nominations. Her first should have been for Election, and I would take out Meryl Streep in Music of the Heart and replace her with Reese Witherspoon in Election.
I just thought...
Okay, you're on, Mr. Popular.
Number 5, Nathan Lane, The Birdcage.
Get the goddamn pinky down. All right, make your fingers like iron, all right? Yeah, and stop trembling. Hold the knife boldly and with strength.
Oh, God, I pierced the toes.
So the comedic performances continue. Here's another great one that should have gotten into the Oscars. Nathan Lane is so funny, so original, so authentic, so great in The Birdcage, one of my favorite films of 1996. And again, I think it's the genre bias that prevented him from getting in. Like, The Birdcage only getting a single Oscar nomination for art direction makes me very sad. Like, that film should have at least gotten into the screenplay category and one acting category for Nathan Lane, although I would have happily seen it get into like Best Picture, Best Costume Design. Like, this is a great LGBTQ film from the mid-90s that I still love to this day. And that Nathan Lane performance, everything he gets to do in that story, like where his character goes in the third act. And it's not just about like dressing up in drag, like what he accomplishes pretending to be the mother at the dinner. It's so funny. It's so great. Nathan Lane has never gotten a movie role in his whole career like he did in The Birdcage. And that would have been the role to recognize him for an Oscar nomination. He did very well at the precursor ceremonies. He got a nomination at the Golden Globes in musical or comedy, and he got a nomination at SAG in supporting actor, kind of like what I'm going to talk about with my number 4 choice. I do think it might have been confusing for some Academy members, like, is he a lead actor in The Birdcage or is he supporting actor? Because at the Golden Globes, he did get into lead actor. I do think it should have been supporting actor. It would have been, in the history of the Academy Awards, an all-timer nomination. Nathan Lane should have gotten in. I mean, the actor who wins is kind of for a comedic performance, Cuba Gooding Jr. and Jerry Maguire. You also have William H. Macy for Fargo. That's another very funny performance. So here you have a rare acting Oscar category where they have some comedic performances in there, but I do think the very easy performance we take out of this category is James Woods for Ghosts of Mississippi. That performance should not have gotten in over Nathan Lane in The Birdcage. I mean, come on.
So actually, we don't know where we are until we hear our last name pronounced.
Number 4, Jamie Lee Curtis, True Lies.
Like one? How about 2?
So again, kind of like what I talked about with Drew Barrymore in Scream, it was going to be an uphill battle for Jamie Lee Curtis to get an Oscar nomination for a genre film like True Lies, an Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie released in the summer. That was going to be tough. Like, no matter how incredible she is in True Lies, and she is incredible, this is the performance I would have given Jamie Lee Curtis not only an Oscar nomination for, but an Oscar win over Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, her best work on film, I think, is in True Lies. She just gets to do so many cool things in that movie. The narrative arc for her character is fantastic, and she just gives that role everything she has. The comedy, the sexuality, the dramatic moments, the action sequence at the end on the bridge. It's just such a delight, and Jamie Lee Curtis is what makes that movie soar, and I would have loved her to have gotten in. Now, unlike Drew Barrymore in Scream, Jamie Lee Curtis actually did very well at the precursor ceremonies. She was nominated at the Golden Globes, and she won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical, and she got in at one of the early Screen Actors Guild Awards ceremonies. I think it was the first one, if I'm not mistaken. And kind of like what I just talked about with Nathan Lane, Jamie Lee Curtis won Best Actress at the Golden Globes for Lead Actress, but she was nominated at SAG in Supporting Actress. I think, like with Nathan Lane, it wasn't entirely clear, like, is she a lead actress or supporting actress in True Lies? I think the presence of her character in that movie is at such a high level, even when she's not, like, physically on the screen. Like, I think that is a lead actress performance, and I just think that would have been a really cool acting nomination, like Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, another movie directed by James Cameron. Like, we could have given Jamie Lee Curtis the Sigourney Weaver Aliens nomination of the 1990s, because like that lead actress category for 94 at the Oscars is not great. It's really weak. Like, I could take out almost all of them and not feel sad about it. Like, even the winning performance by Jessica Lange in Blue Sky, it's fine, but It's not one of the better acting Oscar wins of the 90s by any means. There was room here for Jamie Lee Curtis. I would happily take out Susan Sarandon for The Client. Susan Sarandon, who would win a year later for Dead Man Walking. I would take out her nomination for The Client and put in Jamie Lee Curtis for her magnificent performance in True Lies.
Something before takeoff. Ow! That hurt, you...
Number 3, Leonardo DiCaprio, Titanic.
I'm sorry, you're not going to see your mom again for a long time. Because we're going to America. Full house, boys! No!
Okay, so here we are talking about the Best Actor category of 1997 again. I would like Samuel L. Jackson to be here for Jackie Brown, and I would very, very, very much like Leonardo DiCaprio to be here for Titanic. I do not really understand why DiCaprio was snubbed for that movie. I love Titanic. It's one of my favorite films. It was obviously the most popular movie of 97, the highest grossing movie of its time, and as much as I love Kate Winslet's performance, the special effects, the story, everything, that film for me lives or dies by the DiCaprio performance. He is the person who makes that movie as great as it is. His charisma, his humor, he's a character we immediately connect to, want good things for, and where he goes over that 3-hour running time is just such a thrill to watch. The way he interacts with all the people in Rose's world, and to just see how well DiCaprio has done in his long career. The fact that he doesn't have an Oscar nomination for Titanic feels strange to me. Like, there was a long gap between DiCaprio's first nomination for What's Eating Gilbert Grape all the way to The Aviator in 2005. Like, between 93 and 2004, I feel like there should be one DiCaprio nomination, and the movie that deserved it was Titanic. I don't really understand what happened there. Like, it got into 2 acting categories for Gloria Stewart and Kate Winslet. He was nominated at the Golden Globes. He did not get in at SAG, so that might have hurt him a little bit. I wonder if there was the thinking, like, let's not take this all the way to 15 Oscar nominations. Let's keep it at the all-time record 14 with All About Eve. Let's not go all the way past that to like 15, 16 nominations, because Titanic could have gotten into the screenplay category, and DiCaprio for Best Actor, I think he should have gotten in. Now, this may be kind of controversial. I'll be awaiting your comments. But in the Best Actor category, I would actually take out Jack Nicholson for As Good As It Gets and replace him with Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic. I've never been a huge fan of As Good As It Gets. Like, I think it's fine, but like, I prefer Jack Nicholson's performance that same year in a movie called Blood and Wine than in As Good As It Gets. I don't think he needed that nomination. I thought he was much better a few years later in About Schmitz, and so yeah, I would take him out completely and replace him with Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic.
Just the other night I was sleeping under a bridge, and now here I am on the grandest ship in the world having champagne with you fine people.
Number 2, Pam Grier, Jackie Brown.
Would you like some coffee?
If you're having some.
I am. Come on in. Why don't you make yourself at home?
Alright, I hope you didn't think that I was going to reach the end of this list without talking about Pam Grier's amazing performance, the title performance, in Quentin Tarantino's Jackie Brown. She is bringing it 110% in every scene of that movie. It's so real, so deep. She's so connected to that character. Her interactions with the other characters is so magnetic, especially that relationship, that romance between Jackie Brown and Max Cherry. That final scene gets me every time. As I discussed before when I was talking about Samuel L. Jackson, Jackie Brown is a movie I believe grows on you. It's a hangout movie that gets better every time you watch it. And I'm just like, how did Pam Grier not get in? I mean, I think the obvious answer is the Academy just didn't really respond to the movie. I mean, only giving it that one nomination for Robert Forster, it was almost like a pity nomination, like, all right, the end of the year, Quentin Tarantino, follow up to Pulp Fiction, we'll give it that one supporting actor nomination and call it good. but that's never sat well with me. Jackie Brown should have at least 5 or 6 nominations, and even more so than Samuel L. Jackson, Pam Grier should have made it into lead actress. She got into the 2 big precursor ceremonies. She was nominated at the Golden Globes, and she was nominated at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, so Pam Grier came close. I feel like if the Academy had just liked the movie a little more, Grier makes it in. She is dynamite in this film. I love her as a performer, and this was her role of a lifetime. And I'm gonna be controversial again. I'm gonna take out Helen Hunt in As Good as It Gets, her Oscar-winning performance for As Good as It Gets. I'm gonna take that one out, and I'm gonna put in Pam Grier for Jackie Brown. In my perfect Oscar universe, Peter Fonda wins Best Actor that year for Yuli's Gold, and Judi Dench wins Best Actress for Mrs. Brown, which then a year later allows Lynn Redgrave to win Best Supporting Actress for Gods and Monsters. I could do this all day.
The way I see it, you and me got one thing to talk about. One thing. And that's what you are willing to do for me.
Alright, so before I get to my number 1 choice, here are the 5 runners-up. Courtney Love, The People vs. Larry Flint. This is a performance I've always adored. I remember it was one of the most adult movies I'd ever seen in a theater back in 1996, and everything she brings to that character is so interesting, so hypnotic. It was such an outstanding debut performance in a movie, and I think Woody Harrelson getting into the Best Actor category means that Courtney Love might have come close. The lead actress category of 1996 was a stacked year. It was a hard one to get in, but I do think Courtney Love deserved to be there. James Caan, Misery. As I've talked about on this channel before, Kathy Bates' Oscar win for Misery is one of my favorites of all time. I picked it as my second favorite acting Oscar win ever, but it has always bugged me a little bit that James Caan's performance was just completely ignored come awards time, because I think that movie only works because of what he brings to that character. I know he is often confined to a bed, but he is funny and scared and vulnerable, and he makes that movie work. I think Kathy Bates is as dynamic as she is because of James Caan's fantastic work. The late, great James Caan only got 1 Oscar nomination in his long career. In Best Supporting Actor for The Godfather, I would have loved to have seen James Caan also recognized for his lead performance in Misery. Ray Liotta, Goodfellas. Another movie like Misery that came out in 1990, so I guess I just wasn't a huge fan of the Best Actor lineup that year. I don't know, like I would have loved the performances of both James Caan in Misery and Ray Liotta in Goodfellas to have made it in at the Oscars in Best Actor. I mean, you look at the list, you have Richard Harris for The Field, Kevin Costner for Dances with Wolves. There was room here, I think, for both James Caan and Ray Liotta. The late great Ray Liotta especially had a really interesting career in the movies that was almost never recognized. I don't think he ever got a Golden Globe nomination, a SAG nomination for a theatrical feature film. I think he was recognized at Film Independent for Narc in supporting actor, but that's about it. And it's just really weird to me since his breakthrough dramatic performance in Goodfellas is so incredibly compelling. I think that movie lives or dies by the Ray Liotta performance. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. It always makes me happy that Joe Pesci won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Goodfellas, but that movie is more than just the Pesci performance. Like Robert De Niro's really great in that film. He got a Best Actor nomination that year for Awakenings instead. I don't know if it was because Ray Liotta was so new onto the cinema scene, but he deserved an Oscar nomination for Best Actor for his sensational turn in Goodfellas. Patrick Swayze, Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. A movie I loved as a kid was Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar from 1995, and watching the film again, I want to say about a year ago, I was again struck by the Patrick Swayze performance. Like, that could have gone in a lot of different directions, a lot of really bad directions, but Patrick Swayze makes that character a three-dimensional human being. He's not poking fun. I love John Leguizamo and Wesley Snipes as well, but I feel like the heart of that film is in the Patrick Swayze character and performance. He got in at the Golden Globes. It was going to be tricky to get into that stacked Best Actor lineup at the Oscars. The late, great Patrick Swayze never got an Oscar nomination. I think he was worthy for To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. And Meryl Streep, Death Becomes Her. My favorite Meryl Streep performance of her entire career that did not get an Oscar nomination is her turn in Death Becomes Her. I have watched this movie so many times, and I am always delighted by what Meryl Streep brings to that film and that character. She has never been funnier in a movie in her long and celebrated career. It is such a weird, wild performance, from the very opening where she does that great Broadway number, all the way to that tragically funny final scene. I love her chemistry with Goldie Hawn. She's really great with Bruce Willis. She doesn't hold anything back. She did get a Golden Globe nomination for that performance. I would have loved the Oscars to have rewarded Meryl Streep with a 22nd Oscar nomination for Death Becomes Her. And finally, my number one choice for the most egregious acting Oscar snub of the 1990s. It is not one of the most obvious great performances of all time in the movies by any means, but it's one that I have adored for 25 years in a movie that is one of my top 3 favorite films of all time, Jim Carrey in The Truman Show.
I've tasted other Cocos. This is the best.
What the hell does this have to do with anything? Tell me what's happening!
What Jim Carrey brings to the role of Truman Burbank in Peter Weir's 1998 masterpiece is so special. It's so particular. I don't think there's another actor in the late 1990s who could have played this role as well as Jim Carrey did. This was the movie that brought him out of just doing one comedy after another. There are comedic elements in The Truman Show that I appreciate, that he is perfectly suited for, but the dramatic moments, the moments of self-doubt, the moments of vulnerability, when he longs for this woman he still has hope might see again one day, the way he thinks, the way he lashes out at his wife. There is just one memorable banger scene after another, and Jim Carrey is on fire in this movie. I love his dramatic work in Man on the Moon and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but there is just something about what he brings to Truman Burbank in a story that was so ahead of its time. Jim Carrey was kind of living The Truman Show in 1997, and that all eyes were on him. He was one of the biggest celebrities in the world, and he could have done anything he wanted. He could have done another 10 comedies, and no one would have blinked. But for him to collaborate with the great director Peter Weir that used the persona of Jim Carrey that we all knew and loved and took it in a different direction, and Jim Carrey was up for it, he wanted it, he was hungry for a performance, a character that would allow him to go to the next level, and he did. I love this performance so much, and given that he won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Drama, that was an all-timer moment. That was an all-timer speech. I remember at the time, Jim Carrey was my favorite actor, and I went, oh my God, he's gonna get an Oscar nomination. This is awesome, this is fantastic. And then the movie got into Best Director, it got into Best Screenplay. Ed Harris got the Supporting Actor nomination, but Jim Carrey was snubbed. This was, in every way, a snub. I don't think it was about the movie or the quality of the performance. I think Academy members were like, we're not gonna give Jim Carrey an Oscar nomination. And that just has always bothered me. He was snubbed because of all the comedies he had made. It's like, no, let's push Jim Carrey to the side and let's celebrate Roberto Benigni. Roberto Benigni. It's just always bothered me. It's always pissed me off, honestly. It's like, okay, if there were 5 just like dynamite dramatic performances that got in over Jim Carrey in The Truman Show, I could live with it. But like Roberto Benigni in Life is Beautiful, take it or leave it with me. It's not one of my favorite films, not one of my favorite performances. The impression Jim Carrey gave of Roberto Benigni at that Academy Awards ceremony was spot on. I mean, he did kind of jump in Jim Carrey's ocean. Roberto Benigni wasn't even recognized at the Golden Globes, but by Oscar nominations, by the night of the ceremony, we had kind of pushed The Truman Show away and decided instead to celebrate Life is Beautiful. I mean, I think The Truman Show should have gotten like 7, 8, 9 nominations. It should have gotten into Best Picture. It should have won a couple things. I mean, I guess because it came out back in June of '98, that didn't help. I've always wondered, like, what if The Truman Show had come out in November or December? Might that have helped Jim Carrey get the Oscar nomination? We'll never know. I'm thankful we will always have that incredible Golden Globe speech when he won for Best Actor in a Drama, but it makes me so sad to this day. Here we are in 2023. Jim Carrey has never received an Oscar nomination. I think he should have 3. 1 for Eternal Sunshine, 1 for Man on the Moon, and definitely 1 for one of my 3 favorite films of all time, Peter Weir's The Truman Show.
In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments below, what are your picks for the most egregious acting Oscar snubs of the 1990s? Is there anything I left off the list? We'll see you next time at the Awards Contender.